All right, we're ready to take a trip around the galaxy. Joining me now is Pete Fletzer. Pete, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, man. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk Star Wars. Do you ever get tired of talking Star Wars?
Not yet. But I've been doing it my whole life, ever since I was 7 years old. So I'm always, I'm more surprised that there's always somebody who's willing to talk about Star Wars with me. So that's kind of the way I would put it.
You're surprised that someone talked. I'm surprised there's people who listen sometimes.
Yeah, I can't believe it, yeah. But it's always fun and like flattering. Like somebody actually listened to this. This is great.
Especially, and I don't know how you feel, but there are a billion Star Wars podcasts out there.
Yeah, and too many.
And they find time for you, for me. Like there are people. There's audience for everybody, and they don't like. It's amazing. Thank you all, everybody. It really means a lot too.
Absolutely. And it's funny. When I started my podcast, I was unaware. I knew there were a lot of podcasts. I was thinking maybe 200. And now that I'm doing it myself, holy cow, they're everywhere. And like you said, it's amazing. There's enough for everybody, and clearly not enough because everybody's listening to whatever's out there, which is fantastic.
And every day a new one pops up.
Yeah.
Actually, at Star Wars Celebration, which we're going to get to because I know how many you've been to.
Zero.
Yeah, zero. But people were saying, there's someone who tweeted out, it was so funny today. I ran into somebody that didn't have a Star Wars podcast.
What are you doing here? You're in the wrong place.
It's like they should just call that Star Wars Podcast Celebration. And
now, if there was a podcast convention, it would be just as full, I think.
It probably would be. It's true. It's true. But you have said that you're going to be going to Anaheim Celebration.
I'm definitely, in fact, I'm already ready to get to the computer and order. I've talked to my travel agent already. She's going to try to hook me up with a hotel, and my kids are excited. My wife is not, but I did tell her there'll be spas nearby, so she'll be excited about that. Oh, so yes. I'm just actually right now debating, do I get 2 4-day adult tickets? Because I don't know if she's going to use it. I might have to sell it while I'm there or something. I don't know. I haven't thought that far in advance.
I'll say I don't know how into Star Wars your wife is at all. If she likes it or not. I know
not at all. So I mean, it's not that she doesn't like it. She just doesn't care.
So my wife Erin, she likes Star Wars. She's been on Rebel Scum a bunch of times, but she's not obsessed with it. And she actually went 3 out of the 4 days in Orlando. She only had tickets for 2. And somebody we went with wasn't going to the 4th day, and she goes, "I'll go." And it was just her and I that went the last day. It was Easter Sunday. We were the only two that went in our group. But she actually went and did not rush me out of there. She was cool with being there the entire day, and it. I think honestly, if you're not obsessed with Star Wars, you have more fun at Celebration.
You might, yeah. It's interesting because I think that there's. I did an interview with somebody last night, and the good news is they won't know who I'm talking about because of when this goes. But and it was weird because they weren't as much of a Star Wars fan as I thought, and it was a weird conversation because, like the podcast world, I'm not sure at what level of Star Wars the people I'm talking to need to be at for them to be into. So, but it's interesting because if your wife enjoyed Star Wars Celebration without being, an uber nerd like myself, that says a lot about the way they put the celebration together. And I guess they kind of have to, because it's not going to be all super excited, uber fans. So.
Yeah, and I've said this before, and this will be the last time I say it until next time, that the panels, when we first arrived at Orlando, this woman said, "Don't obsess over the panels. There's way more things to worry about." And of course, we obsessed over the panels. And on that last day, when there was no panels to obsess over, I had the most fun. And I realized, I'm like, well, somebody who's been here a bunch of times obviously knew more than the person who had never been to one. And I mean, the panels you can watch online, they are amazing, and it's fun, the experience and all that. But there's something for everyone everywhere there, and it really is a celebration. It's not just trailer. It is just, hey, we love Star Wars, come look at this R2 unit. Okay.
Fun. And that's why I think like my kids will be able to get into it, and because there'll be much more for them to do. I mean, we went to one of the local baseball teams, one of the local minor league teams did a Star Wars night. And my kids, literally, I think we sat in our seats for about an inning and a half, and we spent the rest of the time talking to R2 and stormtroopers and people dressed up in costume. And so that being said, I think you're right. I think that celebration will be fun for the whole family.
Oh, they're gonna love it. All right, let's get into the meat of this
Sure.
conversation here as my computer updates. All right, let's get into the meat of
Your computer just wants to be ready for the interview. It's there.
He wants to know what's up. He keeps yelling at me. So you are a original generation Star Wars fan.
I am. Yes.
I don't know if you want me to say your age, because I don't know. If
I'm 48. Yes.
48.
As of today, I'm 48. Yeah.
So you saw what is now known as A New Hope in the theater.
Yep.
But tell me about Little Pete before that.
Yeah, so I was always into, I think through my dad, who was definitely he was more of a classic horror film fan. And I remember, so I was 7 when I saw Star Wars, but I remember vividly watching on television every Godzilla movie. I was a huge Godzilla fan. So I loved that kind of genre. I wasn't necessarily a science fiction fan or a fantasy fan, but the Godzilla movies were where my biggest excitement was, and I never missed them. There was like Monster Week every couple months on the local television channel, and I would watch that. So that was my big thing. And I remember I wasn't even that familiar with Star Wars so I ended up seeing Star Wars at the end of the summer of '77, and my birthday's in July. So if you want to send me a gift, July is the right time to do so. But for my birthday that year, my grandmother got me a Star Wars T-shirt, and I really still, I wasn't aware of it that much, but she knew it was popular, and so it was a Star Wars T-shirt, and it was the famous picture of C-3PO and R2-D2 standing in the hall of the blockade runner. And for some reason in my mind, I was convinced that C-3PO was a bad guy. I have no idea why, but in my mind, C-3PO was the bad guy of the movie. And nobody's ever been more wrong ever about
I don't know.
the
Ask
character.
Jason Fry about that one.
But and so I had the T-shirt, and then we finally went to see the movie. And I was excited to see it, but I didn't really... I don't have any memory of really being, like sort of obsessed about, I got to go see this thing. And then, but what I do remember is that from that day on, everything that I saw was compared to Star Wars, absolutely everything. And I remember, I think the next big movie I saw was Close Encounters. And I remember saying that was a good movie, but it wasn't Star Wars. So it definitely had a major impact on my little 7-year-old life at that point.
Well, what was the impact? So your dad says we're going to go see the Star Wars movie, and you go, well, I have a T-shirt. Okay, fine, let's go see it.
Yep.
Dad. And you get in the theater, and you sit there. And at what do you remember a specific moment that just kind of said, "This is the gold standard now"?
Well, I don't. It's funny, and the amazing thing about Star Wars as a genre of film, I think at this point, it's more than just a series. I have almost no memory of the movie itself the first time I saw it, other than the main thing that I remember is Vader coming through the door, standing there in the smoke, hands on his hips, looking around, stormtroopers at his side, and like that to me is the only memory I have from that first day. And I remember sitting in the back of my parents' station wagon, pretending to shoot down TIE fighters on the way home, and that was all that I remember from that very first day. But for some reason, that movie stuck with me, and we saw it again multiple times. And I remember, actually, I think that what connected me to the story the most was there was an LP, an old vinyl record of the story of Star Wars, and it was told in LP 45 minutes, and there was audio from the movie and a narrator, and in fact, I'll send you the link on YouTube because I did find it because I had to listen to it again. That was it. I mean, I remember my little best friend, little Kevin, in my grade school. He and we would come home from school and we would listen to it over and over and over, and it just became part of who we were. And then once the action figures came out, then of course everything changed, because then we created our own Star Wars with the action figures and our own stories and our own we kind of determined what was happening in our own mind and built up the story that way. It was interesting on my show. There was we had Anthony Bresnikan on, and one of the things that he talked about, and he and I got into a conversation about, which I found really interesting because I hadn't thought about it before. But back in the late 70s, you didn't have the same movie cycle that you have now, right? Today, Black Panther comes out 3 months later. My son has it on digital video. He can watch it again. He can watch it whenever he wants, and it's there's no sort of mystery to it. Whereas ultimately, the action figures were the only connection we had to Star Wars. That and the story of Star Wars on vinyl, and so we had to create our own Star Wars for the 3 years we had to wait between movies.
Yeah. So that I got to talk to you about this now before we get to Empire Strikes Back, because I'm a child. I was born in 1981.
Okay.
So I was born after Empire, right before Jedi. But I mean, if I saw Jedi, even if I did see Return of the Jedi in the theater, I don't really think it would have any impact on me anyway as a 2-year-old. So for me, I always knew that Luke and Leia were brother and sister. I always knew that Vader was their father. Jabba the Hutt was always a thing. Ewoks, Jawas are equal. Like everything, like that's how it was for me. And I played with the toys, and nothing really mattered. And I'm pretty sure I made everything up when I played with the toys. However, you have a different experience because you saw A New Hope, or just the Star Wars.
It was just Star Wars.
Star Wars,
right?
yeah. Which actually is what I actually. Spoiler alert! I didn't know it was called A New Hope until the special editions.
Oh, really?
Yeah, okay, I actually had no idea. And then I think I saw it was I had the novelization for Star Wars and Empire, and it doesn't say New Hope in the novelization. It's my parents' novelization, and I remember just seeing the new reprint of it, and I said, "What, A New Hope? What? When did this happen?" I guess it happened before, because my copy of A New Hope on VHS was recorded off of television, so I think we missed that part of it.
So you got the commercials and everything. That's great.
Well, they were. My parents were slick. They paused during commercials, and they waited. They were hard.
Now, was it one of those remotes that was on a string? Because my first VCR, I remember, but my dad, when he got our first VCR, it was a top loader, right?
Yeah.
It was like the size of a desk, and the remote was on a string. It's very fun. Anyway, not like a real string, like a tin can thing, but like a wire.
I don't remember a wire. It was JVC. I remember that. It was like the size of like a desk.
Right.
It was massive. Yeah. And the buttons were the size of the laptop now too.
Right, like click.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it was. But I just want to know from someone who experienced it.
Yeah.
Going from Star Wars to Empire.
Yep.
Before we get into that big reveal.
Right.
Did you have any expectations, preconceived notions going into Empire, or were you just in for the ride?
It's funny too, because in addition to not having any expectations, by today's standards, the way we watch movies, the way we experience sagas and series, we set so many expectations. I mean, literally zero. Like it was going to be Star Wars 2 as far as we knew, right? So we didn't think about what we were going to get, and I think that might be why all the pieces of it worked so well, because you weren't going in waiting to, it was, I mean, J.J. Abrams is big with the mystery box, and actually, if you think about it, the I Am Your Father was the first sort of cliffhanger to in modern sort of storytelling to really have that kind of an impact. So, I mean, literally just went in and we're happy to go see Luke and Leia and Han again, and those robots and that bad guy. We knew, because what was funny, the one thing that I do recall before Empire Strikes Back came out was because at the end of Star Wars, A New Hope, Vader's TIE fighter spinning off into space. So we all we get it. He's not dead. He's coming back. That bad guy's coming back. But we didn't know how or what. And the first Empire Strikes Back poster I remember was the one that's just his head, sort of the silhouette of his head, or sort of the starry sky version. And we're like, yeah, that guy's coming back. But again, had no idea how important he was, or there was the story around Vader. Honestly, if Lucas is being honest, I don't think he even knew how much of a part he would end up playing. And so we, like I said, we were literally just going in and happy to see Star Wars 2. Like, we're gonna get more of that space, and so there was much more anticipation between Empire and Jedi because of what was left hanging there. But I do remember seeing Empire, and I don't have as much memory as I'd like, but I do remember that there was we just thought it was a great movie, top to bottom, and it was cool. And when it ended on the cliffhanger, we were like, oh, we have to wait. I can't believe we have to wait. And the funny thing is, like I just recently put up on my website sort of if Empire Strikes Back was reviewed by today's sort of toxic fanboys, and the way they would respond to, all. I mean, so think about it. Really, in the Empire Strikes Back, put yourself in that time frame. There was no expanded universe. The only other Star Wars story we had was the Star Wars Christmas special, which was, we'll just leave that there. There was the horrible Christmas special. And there was, I think, Splinter of the Mind's Eye had come out. But there was no sort of expanded universe. So put yourself in this mindset. You go see The Empire Strikes Back, and Luke uses the Force to pull a lightsaber to him. We didn't know that was a thing. There was a Force ghost of Obi-Wan Kenobi. We didn't know that was a thing. And so all these Force powers were introduced to us, and we readily accepted it. We hungrily ate it. So it was a different. Yeah, again, I'd love to know what today's sort of pick apart stories type of fandom would do to The Empire Strikes Back.
It's interesting. I also get a headache thinking about that. It's true though. Like if there's a new Force power now, it's how does that happen? That never happened before.
Yeah. Nobody told us about that one.
No, it's also called evolution. Let's just live with it. Things happen. Stories evolve. I kind of agree with you. I don't think Lucas knew exactly Vader's pure role when he wrote A New Hope at that point. That's when you watch, it just doesn't feel like that. But do you remember watching Empire Strikes Back and feeling as riveted as you did in A New Hope? Because let's go back to the fanboyness, which obviously know as a 10-year-old you wouldn't have been. But were you? And as a 10-year-old, how did you gravitate to it? Was it as strong as A New Hope, or were you kind of like?
I actually think so. A New Hope grabbed me in a different way because it was. I think there's a big difference between a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old in the way you digest anything. So as a 7-year-old, Star Wars was just pure action and spectacle and, oh my God, that's amazing stuff. And Empire, I mean, you could almost argue that Lucas made the perfect film for a 7-year-old and then a 10-year-old and then a 13-year-old because the films matured with each episode. And so I remember it was the first time that I came out of a movie and had sort of an analytic conversation with my dad about it. It wasn't, we weren't talking about deep literature and connections to Greek mythology and blah, 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 but we were certainly talking about, so what's this Lando guy going to do? Is he really going to help him? And are they ever going to find him? And, we haven't even said yet, is Vader really Luke's father? And so it was the first time we had really great sort of conversations about a movie. And then of course me and my friends for the next 3 years, what's interesting is we now totally take for granted the fact that between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, we are having conversations every single day online with people we'll never meet, having deep conversations about what does that mean and where's that going. And then it was just my 3 or 4 really close sort of Star Wars geeky friends, and we all had our own ideas and our own things. And I think I said it recently on one of the shows. There was this, for some reason, I remember looking at the galaxy at the end of Empire Strikes Back, and one of my friends was like, they're definitely coming to Earth because that was the Milky Way they were looking at. And so, I mean, that's a bizarre thought, but we would never even consider that now. But boy, we didn't know any different. I mean, it was that, and Battlestar Galactica was big at the time, and Buck Rogers was the TV show that was big. So, but yeah, sure, Luke and Leia could come to Earth. That could happen, but thank God that didn't happen. But so we were developing our own theories. But the funny thing is, it was happening not only in my little neighborhood in North Jersey, but it was happening around the world in these little tiny groups of people having these conversations. And that is actually, in a way, it's kind of it's super special, and it's lost on today's moviegoer because now you're in Canada, I'm in Jersey, and here we are having a conversation, and that's awesome, and that's actually great in its own way. But there's also something to be said for that little intimate conversation between me and 3 friends on the school bus.
Oh, that's definitely true. And also everything that we can read online versus making it up on our own, and
right,
all of that. But the Vader as Luke's father, like I said, growing up, that was just a thing. Like I never had the surprise. I always just was like, well, that's Luke. Like the I am your father. For me, it always hit me though, but not in like the kind of way. It was more like because of Luke. It was Luke's reaction to it. That's how I associated with it, and that's why I think when people argue, well, if you show people episodes 1 through I guess 9 now, that is ruined. I'm like, yes, but also I think you look at it from a different perspective as well. So
the surprise is so important, and it's interesting because so my 9-year-old daughter is starting to become more and more of a Star Wars fan, and I have a video somewhere of her seeing. I was kind of conscious with her and her experience of Star Wars, of making sure that surprise was still there. So she sort of watched some of them, but she always kind of knew the Luke story. She kind of knew the Anakin story, but she never put the two together. And I have a video of her seeing the I'm your father scene, and she looks at me and she's like, is that true? Is that right? So that's great. Now, on the other hand, you have my 6-year-old son who is been into Clone Wars and Rebels, and he's digested Star Wars as one giant meal, right? Whereas for me, it was one bit at a time. And for my son, it's been like, give me everything I can get. And he'll watch them out of order. And so he knows Anakin is Vader. And sometimes he'll say something to me about it. And I know it kind of bothers him, but he loves Anakin and he thinks Vader's cool. So it's a weird thing for him. Now, I'm actually right now, I'm working on a series for my podcast where my daughter and I are watching each of the 10 movies in chronological order. So, and we started talking about, and this was surprising to me, but I'm excited to see where it goes. We started talking about Palpatine, and we started talking about Sidious, and she doesn't make the connection yet. Oh, so wow. I can't wait for her to see Revenge of the Sith. I want to see if that's her sort of I'm your father moment, and because I even kind of probed her on it. I was like, so what do you think of this guy? What do you think of that guy? And there's no connection there. And that to me is really cool, because if you're going to watch 1 through 9, that's an important reveal.
Yes, it is.
So, because the Anakin Vader one's already going to have been given away. So I'm really curious to see how that goes. But to me, I was shocked. And I remember I saw all 3 Star Wars movies with my best friend, little guy who I'm still best friends with to this day. And I remember seeing Empire, and when Vader said that, we were just, I think like all the air went out of our body. We just were like floored by that, and we talked about it for 3 years.
So did you believe it, or was that really like a point of contention where you both did you say that's not going to happen, or yes it is, or were you both just walking on eggshells like I don't want to commit to either answer?
Yeah, no, it was really, it literally was that we didn't know, and we didn't, I like the way you put that. Yeah, neither one of us were willing to say, yes, he definitely is, or no, he isn't. But I remember there was a Starlog magazine that we get, that there was a picture, that famous picture of Luke standing next to Vader. We now know it was before they boarded the AT-AT on Endor. But I remember seeing that picture, and we were just like, whoa, he does join him. Maybe he is his father. And just our response was like, we were blown away by just that picture. Neither one of us was willing to say, yes, he definitely is, or he isn't.
Well, I guess not knowing the answer and then seeing that picture just changes the context of that picture entirely. Which is very similar to when we look at, let's say the Vanity Fair pictures that come out. We don't know what they're showing us.
Exactly.
So we all have to make it up. I never thought about that, because that just wasn't a part of, wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool to think back on that, like to somebody who knows it already, right? To see that picture, you're like, yep, that's before they went back up to Death Star 2 and fought it out. But to me and my buddy at that time, it was like, when does the, like, again, much like the Vanity Fair pictures, like we don't even know when those scenes take place. Like we didn't know if the movie started with Luke going to see Vader. We didn't know. It was really wild, really wild.
That's so cool. So after you watch Empire, how does your were you still playing with action figures at 10?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
I'm still playing with action figures. I'm 48. I'm still.
I know. Me too.
I like to say it's because I have kids, but no, it has nothing to do with it.
You're like, I'll buy these for you guys, but also they're for me. So how did playing with action figures change after Empire, though? Having this new maybe revelation come out, did that change anything? Yoda's now introduced. What changed in your action figure playing?
That's a good question. I think we were, I mean, granted, it was that 10 to 13 age, so we weren't creating as many stories, but we certainly were. We were trying to think of what role each one of those characters was going to play. Nobody even knew if Yoda was going to come back in Return of the Jedi. And that's another really interesting thing. And I'll throw it out there before I forget, from Empire. I remember there was a Time magazine story that came out a couple months before Empire Strikes Back. And much like today, there were pictures of Yoda, but they didn't say it was Yoda. And so they weren't revealing that little green guy that he talks to in the swamp is Yoda, because that was supposed to be one of the big reveals. But we didn't know if Yoda was going to come back and play a different role in Return of the Jedi. But oddly enough, I think one of the things that I remember most sort of pre-Return of the Jedi, because there was so much secrecy, and in the days before the internet, it was a hell of a lot easier to keep secrets. Yes. I remember I went to a friend's birthday party, and he got a bunch of Return of the Jedi things before the movie came out for his birthday, and one of them was a sleeping bag, and Jabba the Hutt was on the sleeping bag, and we all, like, all these little nerdy, pimply 12-year-old boys were just like freaking out over this this Jabba the Hutt image on the sleeping bag, and we were like, we knew something. We felt like we knew something about the movie, and because we had it was such a well-kept secret. Nobody knew anything about what was going to happen in that movie. And I remember literally the phrase "edge of your seat," being at that point watching Vader and the Emperor, and just waiting for Vader to make a move while the Emperor is blue lightninging the hell out of Luke, and just I literally on the edge of my seat, just like do something, and there was just so much tension in that movie the first couple times you see it, and especially when you're 13.
Well, you said something a little bit earlier where you said that the movies each matured as they went along, but a lot of people, not me because I was a kid and they were amazing, but a lot of people say that the Ewoks actually kind of ruined the movie in a lot of ways. So as a 13-year-old, what were your stance on the Ewoks?
I didn't have a problem with them. I really didn't. But it's funny. I remember my dad, who's a science fiction fan, and some of his friends being like, the Ewoks, they ruined it. They're just a bunch of big teddy bears. And I had no problem with it. But it's funny when you look at, one of the things that, for better or worse, George Lucas was incredibly brilliant at was introducing the right type of characters for the right age. And, on my podcast, I do this thing where I ask people what they like more, Ewoks, Porgs, or Jar Jar Binks. And it's such a wide range of answers depending on who's there. But the funny thing is, my 9-year-old daughter, when she did the very first episode, we were just sort of testing the equipment, and I kept the recording. She says, that's such a tough question because I love them all. And those are three things that were created for the 9-year-old to experience, right? Yeah. So as a 13-year-old, the Ewoks didn't really bother me at all. So, but it's funny, you do hear the older fans who are like, George was just trying to sell more toys. When you're 13, you don't think about it that way.
Well, as a 38-year-old who saw Ewoks on ice capades as a child, Ewoks. but I actually sympathize with your daughter because I like them all equally as well. Like, Ewoks will always have that special place for me because of my childhood.
Yeah.
But when I saw the Phantom Menace, we were talking before this, where I had no problem with Jar Jar. I actually liked Jar Jar. And then when I got to college, people were like, I hate Jar Jar. And that's when, as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, I was like, what are you talking about? How immature am I? And then Porgs are, I think that they're very different from Ewoks and Gungans because they're just kind of animals, right? They don't really have personalities. They're just
right.
They're not smart, but they're amazing.
I think the reason people had problem with porgs though is because they were clearly designed as merchandise, right? I understand they were put in because the puffins were all over the island and they had to cover them up, but the reason they came up with the Clayton Sandell was telling me this. The reason they came up with the porg sound effect first was because they had to put that in the toys, which were coming out. So and I guess maybe that's why I kind of lumped them in with Ewoks, because if you believe that the Ewoks were there to sell toys, then you certainly believe that the porgs are there to sell toys, and Jar Jar is just there to test your limits of physical humor, I think, in Star Wars.
No, I think it's a fair question that all three of them I think are the same. However, porgs they don't speak.
They have no impact on the story. They're just there.
They're just there.
Yeah.
But I listened to that one where you mentioned that. I said, that's interesting.
I was surprised. But
in Canada, we
totally
got very
surprised.
few porg toys. That a friend of mine from Philly had to send me a porg. Actually, a little stuffed porg that squeaked because they weren't here. I was like, I just want a porg. Like, no,
it is fun. I part of the cynical side of me wants to hate the porgs, but on the other hand, it was the first Last Jedi toy I bought was a porg pop figure. So I do like them,
yes.
So.
It's just they're harmless. Well, unless they step on a lightsaber, then you don't really know what's going to happen.
Anything can happen.
Yeah, anything can happen there. So you're watching. You enjoy Ewoks. Vader Emperor. You said that got very, very intense. How did you feel about Anakin's return, if that's what you want to call it? Vader turning back to the light, throwing Emperor Palpatine down the shaft, and saving the galaxy.
Yeah, it's funny because. I don't know if it's because it was a simpler time or whatever, but that was redemption enough, right? He did his thing. He took care of the Emperor. He saved his son, and he's a good guy now. And we love that. But it's kind of interesting having lived through all three movies in a very impressionable part of my life, and having seen Darth Vader, who was just a cool bad guy from Star Wars, to Empire Strikes Back, where he became sort of a super villain, to Return of the Jedi, where he had a redemption arc. I don't feel like he had a redemption arc in Empire. In Empire, he was just bad. He was just evil. But it all worked. It worked really well. And so seeing him do that, and then seeing his mask come off, I think it's the sort of credit that George Lucas doesn't get enough credit for, is to have such a gentle, kind old man underneath that mask was so powerful. Because at the beginning of Empire, of course, you saw this horribly scarred head. You didn't really even know what was under there. And to have that those gentle eyes look back at Luke was really, I think, even as a 13-year-old, it kind of struck me in a way that was unexpected. I think part of me, like the wannabe tough guy kid, wanted to see like a skull with blood and gore. But it was much more effective as, somebody who looked more like my grandfather than some hideous monster. And it really worked really well. And I think it's important because you're able to come to terms with that redemption at that point, right? If he was still a monster under the mask, you would probably take it a little bit differently. But I remember being, on the edge of my seat to see him throw him over the edge. And then when Luke was about to take that mask off, it was like, what's going to be under there? And it was really, it was a much more powerful movie. Now, at the end of the day, Return of the Jedi is probably not in my top 5 movies. I like it as a film. At the time, I think it was much better, and as I'm talking about it with you, I'm realizing what it meant. But it absolutely worked for that trilogy. And if you think about it, we kind of assumed that was it for Star Wars, and we didn't know, there was no plans for it to come back. There was no, rumor. Of course, there was always the rumors that there were going to be 9 Star Wars movies or 12 Star Wars movies or whatever the number was going to be. But the story ended. And if the movie ended there, if the series ended there and we never got another Star Wars movie, we could be satisfied with that. And I think we kind of were. and then we're just happy to have it, I think.
And how long after Return of the Jedi were you still playing with those action figures? Did it last for a while, or did it end quickly for a 13-year-old?
Yeah, I think at that point, I think Star Wars kind of disappeared for a while. Shortly thereafter, I think it was a summer of Star Wars. It was all Return of the Jedi, everything we could get, everything we could find. But I couldn't tell you exactly when it kind of ended, but it wasn't. I would imagine it wasn't that far after that Star Wars kind of took a backseat to everything else. And again, I think it's because there was no expectation that there was more to come. So it was like, all right, that's a chapter that's closed.
It's done. Let's move on now. So now you're entering what I like to refer to as the dark times. This is when Star Wars kind of vanished for a little while. For some of us more than others. For me, it was I watched Return of the Jedi at Christmas because my family had a VHS tape where it was Return of the Jedi, and after it was Christmas Vacation. So when it came time to watch Christmas Vacation, I was in charge of fast forwarding Return of the Jedi, but I would always fast forward it. And for some reason, I remember this every year, at least 3 years in a row. I don't know what I was thinking, but I would fast forward to Jabba's palace, which is the beginning of the movie,
right?
And then I would get sucked in. And I would remember why I love Star Wars, but then I'd watch Christmas Vacation and kind of not forget about it, but it would be, I wouldn't be at the forefront anymore. It'd be like, kids back there, Ninja Turtles are in, let's go. Let's do this.
Yep.
So for you, you're a little bit older than I was, so you have these dark times. When did you get out of the dark times? Was it the Thrawn trilogy?
So when did the Thrawn trilogy come out? Was that like early 90s? I think
it was early 90s, yeah.
Yeah, and so... so I ended up getting back into Star Wars for a couple of reasons. Yeah, I remember reading the Thrawn series, and I enjoyed it. But I think one of the things about all those sort of EU novels in that time frame, and I've had this conversation with a couple different people. I don't consider myself a science fiction fan. In fact, I spoke once when I was working with Star Wars Galaxy magazine at a science fiction convention, a Star Trek convention, and I had a presentation about the Star Wars is a myth. I used to call it the fairy tale for the generation that didn't have one. And so I started my presentation at a Star Trek convention by saying Star Wars is not science fiction. And people literally got up and left. They were like, if it's not sci-fi, I don't care. But I enjoyed the Thrawn novels. I thought they were decent. They were very good, but I never really got into much of the novels because they were cool sci-fi stories. But I'm not and quite honestly, I don't read as many of the books even today as I would like. I just don't have the time. It's a big investment.
Oh, yeah.
But when in the mid '90s, my father had his science fiction horror trivia game come back out, or not come back out. He created it. I ended up doing 200 Star Wars questions from the original movies for this trivia board game that they created. And at the same time, I started working at a company doing website design and building. And I was like, I could build a website. What's something that I like? And I got back into Star Wars because I wanted to pursue my interest in writing. And so I wrote the trivia questions for my father's game, which lasted a couple of years and kind of fizzled. They were sort of introducing a board game just as board games were completely dying. If they could get back to this retro thing, maybe they could bring it back, but
rebrand it retro.
Rebrand it, yeah. Smaller box, rebrand it. So I built this website in 1994 or 5, I think, probably even a little bit earlier than that, because what I wanted to do was, for my dad's game, I was writing columns about Star Wars. And I had a family friend whose little 3-year-old I was introducing to the original Star Wars movies, and so there was, I felt like Star Wars was still there somewhere, and so I created this website called Echo Base, which I think was either an AOL site or a GeoCities site or something like that, and just started having conversations again with people and realizing that there were these people out there that were still Star Wars fans, and they wanted to talk about Star Wars. And so that was my reconnection. And just about the same time, suddenly the special editions were being announced, and there was rumblings that these prequel movies were coming out, and so I got back. But I was I think, before Star Wars became sort of cool again, before the prequels, I was collecting. I was trying to find as many of the older sort of Star Wars toys that I could find. And I wasn't crazy about it. I wasn't Steve Sansweet level by any stretch, but I was sort of trying to relive some of those older days and find some of these toys. And so I had a small collection, a modest collection. And so that was where I was spending my time. I was spending more of my time when the Power of the Force figures came back out in '95. That was a big deal. I really enjoyed those. And but again, there was no movies. I was still watching the VHS versions of the films and trying to relive them versus having something new to talk about.
You mentioned Power of the Force, but there was no eBay, no Amazon, any of that. So
right.
How did you go about finding the older stuff? Did you just go to the garage sales down the street?
I was literally, flea markets and garage sales, and some guy would be selling an old, Millennium Falcon that was missing the top or something, and making just sort of finding those things, and that's kind of one of the reasons why my collection never really became anything too amazing, because it was a lot of, frankly, junk that people were getting rid of. But to me, it was that connection to when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old playing with the toys. So it was trying to find sort of remnants of what still remained, because all my stuff ended up just buried in neighbors' yards and stuff, because we were creating our own Star Wars stories.
Yeah, I got my Yoda stuck in a tauntaun. I don't even know what happened to that. It's gone. I remember one day my Falcon, I had the that huge Falcon.
Yeah, yep.
And it was gone one day. And I went to go play with it. And my parents were like, oh, we gave your Star Wars stuff to charity. And I was like, oh. What? Okay, so I have like 5 figures left. I'm like, and they're like, if we would have kept those. I'm like, yeah. Let's forget about it. Let's move on. So,
it's funny. Just literally last night, a friend of mine sends me a text, and he's like, hey, look what I found at my mom's house. And it was this Darth Vader collector's case. And I was like, are there any figures in it? He's like, I don't know. I didn't even open it. I'm like, open it up. He's sending me pictures. And yeah. But it's funny. I still have a handful of just abused, like, Luke Skywalker X-Wing pilot figures and, Hoth general things. And and they're beat to crap. They're like all the paint's chipped off them, but they were well loved, which, there are days where I kick myself and I'm like, oh, if I'd only kept that snow speeder. But then I'm like, I had so much fun with it when I was a kid. That there's so much, you can't, it sounds so cliched, but you can't really put a value on that at all. So
that's the point of an action figure, especially when you're that age. Like, my Stormtrooper has no fingers on it, and I still have it, and it's yellow, but I love it. And
exactly.
It doesn't matter.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, but so you started a website before the web is what we know it today.
It was probably, honestly, one of the, if not the first Star Wars fan websites. And I did it because the job I was at the time, I was an inside sales rep, and just a really crappy job. But I remember my boss was like, hey, have you heard of this internet thing? And I was like, oh yeah, it's kind of interesting. And I wanted to be a writer. I loved computer programming, and I loved digital design. So the internet was doing all those things in once, and so I built this website. And it was, I had no idea what. Ideally, I just wanted to put some of my Star Wars writing on something, and suddenly people were finding it, and there were people who were like excited to talk to me about Star Wars. I was like, oh wow, this is kind of cool. So. That's how that ended up happening.
How was it talking back then online? Was it like email? Like how are those conferences? Chat boards? What,
it was
like
much,
bulletin
much
boards,
slower.
Right? Yeah,
so,
much slower.
It was. It's funny. I had to figure out how to program an email form so people could send me questions, and I would try to respond to the questions, and I did like a little trivia game it was honestly, the strange thing is to say, it was before Google, right? So my trivia questions that were on there, you actually had to know the answers in order to answer them. So it was so when I did a trivia contest, like people actually had to know. They couldn't just go Google the answers. So, but it was it was so people were just sending me basically things through a form, an email form, and I'd respond to it that way. Yeah.
That's so cool. But that actually led to a huge moment in your life.
Yeah, yeah. So I had because I was one of the only Star Wars websites at the time. This was in like 1995, before the Star Wars special editions came out. Steve Sansweet was going around to different conventions, Star Trek conventions mainly, and he was showing clips and slides from the Star Wars special editions, and so people wanted to know where he was. So they were contacting me because I was their only Star Wars connection, and I would tell them, look, I have nothing to do with Lucasfilm, but thanks for asking. If I find out, I'll let you know. And I got so many requests to find out where he was that I decided to call Lucasfilm directly. And one afternoon, I picked up the phone, and I remember I said, I called and I got whoever answered the phone. I said, hey, I'd like to, if you could get me Steve Sansweet's itinerary, where he's going to be at which conventions, I'd like to put it up on my website. And I remember the person was like, you have a what? What now? What are you doing? And I was like, yeah, I have a website, and people are asking where Steve's going to be. And they said, all right, hang on a minute. And they put me on hold. And I thought for sure they were just either going to blow me off or come back and be like, here, give us something to mail to. And next thing I know, it's Steve Sansweet on the phone with me. And they just put me straight through to his office, and we started talking, and I was explaining to him the same stories I just told you about, I wanted to write and blah, blah, blah. The thing is, the very short version of a very long story was I had finagled my way to get tickets to the premiere of the IMAX movie called Special Effects, which was directed and produced by Ben Burtt. And one of the selling factors of that was they created an IMAX version, recreated an IMAX version of the opening scene from Star Wars with the blockade runner and the Star Destroyer, and it was going to be premiered in New Jersey at the IMAX theater near us. So I had made them a deal where I would put a coupon on my website, one of the first digital coupons, probably printed on dot matrix printers all around New Jersey. And in exchange, all I wanted was tickets to the premiere. And they're like, yeah, sure. So when I was talking to Steve, I said, hey, by the way, do you have anybody covering this event? He's like, no, but I'll tell you what, go do it, write about it. If it's good, send me your other stuff. If it's good, I have more work than I can get done. And we'll see how it goes. So I went to the event. I talked to Ben Burtt. I wrote this 150 word article, and Steve liked it. He liked my other stuff, and next thing I know, I'm contributing regularly to Star Wars Galaxy magazine, which was phenomenal. Just such a stroke of luck. I couldn't believe it.
I have to cite Akbar for a second before we get into Star Wars Galaxy, because Ben Burtt, for me personally, the first time I saw The Force Awakens in theater, when the lightsaber turned on, when Finn turned it on,
yep,
I missed Ben Burtt.
Yeah.
I heard it, and I don't know how many other people did. I've only spoken to a handful who have felt the same, where it's missing something. I feel like his fingerprints are so, like almost Lucas level on Star Wars.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. Yep.
So I have to go all selfish on this. Can you just talk to me about that interview?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, he was, so I actually got to talk to him twice. I talked to him at the special effects premiere, and then couple of issues into writing for Star Wars Galaxy magazine, there was a whole thing about revisiting the sound design for the special editions. And you've seen him in interviews. He's so laid back, and he was just so friendly. And I think I don't want to say he was excited that I was familiar with his secrets that he'd shared, but he seemed to appreciate that I knew where some of these sounds came from, and he was as excited to see the films as I think everybody else was, and I feel like he's one of those guys that never took for granted what his job was. And to your point, I think that's part of the thing that you miss about his sound design is I think now I don't want to take away from Ren. I can't remember his name. The guy who does the sound now for the sequels trilogy. But it's much more digital, right? Whereas Ben Burtt was literally going out. I mean, it's the old story of him, finding the wire and clanging it with a wrench to get the famous laser sound. But there's it's so organic. The sound that came from Ben Burtt is so organic. The Falcon sounds, my favorite Star Wars sound effect is sort of the little high pitched whine that hits just before the Falcon explosion of the jets. That's my favorite sound. And you don't get that by mixing some digital sounds that you have around. You have to have found a tone that you want to bring into it. And he was just such it's funny. You meet, there's a couple people that I've met that I've admired, not just in Star Wars. Like I ran into Lars Ulrich from Metallica at a restaurant in LA, and he was very cool. And I was so relieved. Meeting Ben Burtt, and when I met Rick McCullum, they were what you would want them to be, which is such a relief. Because you hear so many stories about meeting people, and you're like, oh, well, that shatters my image. But I cannot say enough nice things about Ben Burtt, because he was just, like I said, I feel like he was as excited to be a part of it as I was to meet him and talk to him about what he did.
That's amazing. And I should say too, like the sound design in the sequel trilogy.
Oh, it's not bad at all.
And I could not even begin to do that. So it's not, I'm not bashing it. It's just I just listening to it, I felt like there was that piece, and maybe that's just a period of time. It's a piece of time that we'll never get back, because that's just how things have evolved now, and that's how it is. But so you're writing Star Wars Galaxy magazine.
Yep.
When did you find out that the special editions were coming, and what was your reaction to that?
It was the special editions I had found out just around the time that I started writing for Star Wars Galaxy, and actually, so I had ended up the first time I met Steve Sansweet face to face after talking to him over the phone was at one of the. Might have been in Philadelphia. He was doing one of the special edition pieces, and so he and I got together and met face to face, and we talked a lot about the special editions. And I became, because I'm such a Star Wars fan, and became such a fan of special effects, that sort of thing, and sort of really became engrossed in Ben Burtt, the sound design revisitation, and really got into that. And so not only was I learning about it, but there were actually a couple local, there was a local college radio show and a couple of things that called me and interviewed me about what I knew about what was happening, which was kind of cool. But I was so excited to see them. And I remember it was, honestly, it's an interesting thing to think about, but the special editions were the very first time we had any sort of Star Wars backlash. We're so used to it now, but when Greedo shot first, or the even the Jabba the Hutt scene, which honestly does not work as well as I wish it would, but we were just excited to see that stuff. There was so much excitement. I think it was an interesting combination of our favorite movies coming back after 20 years. The prospect of what could be done in this post Jurassic Park world from a special effects perspective, and then just sort of, again, I think it was just that opportunity to get back and see these movies in the theaters, and to see them again in the theaters with 500 people versus 4 of your best friends on a couch was a completely different way to see the movies.
So I was in high school when the special editions came out, and I wasn't around any backlash for them. Oddly enough, that was just where my life was at in that one. But I remember being super excited for Jabba being in.
Oh,
and when I found out it was A New Hope, it was the best, and I to this day will maintain that it is perfect. I do like they redesigned him in 2012.
Yeah, 11. Right. Yep.
He looks a lot better, but Han still walking over the tail is still.
That's still pretty cool.
But I think when you look at the saga as a whole, that scene now makes a lot of sense. Like, maybe the execution, but the scene is it's awesome. So you watched all three of those with your dad in the theater?
I did. There were two opportunities. There's one time was we went to me, him, and my mother actually all went to one of those screenings where all three movies were played in one day, which was a much longer day than I thought it would be, but it was great to do. But what was cool was because I was working with Star Wars Galaxy magazine, I was able to go to the New York premiere of the special edition of A New Hope, and I took my dad, which was very cool to be able to take my dad to go see the movies that he took me to see when I was a kid at the Ziegfeld Theater in New York City, which was really wild. But what was cool about that was, again, it was that sort of reimagining, and I tell anybody who will ask, if, when Rise of Skywalker comes out, if there's an opportunity to see the original movies in the theater, you have to go do it. You have to go see it with 500 fans. The movie's completely different.
The only Star Wars movie I have not seen in the theater is Return of the Jedi, which is my favorite Star Wars movie. When their special edition came out, my grandmother was sick, so I was just unable to go. So hopefully one day I could see that one in there before they alter it anymore. If they haven't, I can't wait to see. It was playing at Star Wars Celebration Chicago. I think they always show the movies somewhere.
Okay.
And I didn't go. So of course I saw it. I was like, I'm never going to see this movie in the theater because I grew up watching them on VHS or on TV, and then when I saw A New Hope in the theater, I think that was the first movie I ever saw, the special edition, with cheering in the theater. There was this excitement in the air for a movie that was 20 years old at the time, that everyone had seen at least 50 times.
Yep.
And no one cared. We were all there to experience for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's something about that very first movie that every time Luke goes down the trench, something in my head says there's still a chance he's going to miss. There's still a chance that's not going to. I don't know why that works, but it does every single time. So better than any of the other movies. Yep.
And it's so simplistic. It's so simple. It's just a great achievement, I think. Just everything about it is just wow. Just great. Yeah. I do know someone that just purchased the original version of it on Blu-ray, because you can buy those at conventions now, where they took the original film print and put on, and his comment was, I like it, but Tatooine is so bare. There's nothing going on. It's just it's a desert. It was 77. It was a desert. Yeah. That's it. So did you appreciate those movies the exact same, or did you have backlash of your own, or could you see past? Even though I know you said the Jabba thing didn't work as well as it should, or you hoped. Yeah. Could you see past that, or were you kind of?
Well, I'm an unabashed fanboy, so I've never honestly had a problem with even though, like, for example, Phantom Menace, which is a step or two ahead probably in our conversation, but I never really have a major problem with any of them, and so I see through the flaws. Absolutely. I mean, if I'm looking at it as a film critic or even a film technology critic, the Stormtrooper on the dewback looks awful, but it's really awesome. So I went into every one of them, and I was so excited. And it's funny when you have a conversation with somebody who wants to not like it, when you have a conversation with somebody who wants to hate the Ewoks, like, instead of fighting it, I'm just kind of like, okay, I'm not gonna bother to defend it, because it's not life or death. But I mean, I accept it for what it is. I mean, there's special effects problems with the prequels that I cringe when I look at, but I don't care, because it's my favorite movies and it's my favorite stories. So I'm kind of okay with it.
The prequels are amazing, so let's just get that out of the way. Well, actually, let's go into the prequels, because we're talking. Sure. There's a great conversation, but it's going long. So let's go into the prequels here. Special edition aside, now it's okay. Lucas is coming through on his promise, which I gotta side by one more time. Is here in Canada, in Toronto, we have a television channel called City TV. I think it's now called City, but it used to be City TV in the 80s, and in the 90s. If you were up past midnight, which as a teenager I was a lot, they would have this. They would rewind the show called Rewind, and they would take you back to the 80s, and they would just literally go chronologically through the years. And one day, randomly, I watched this thing. I don't know why, and it was 1984, And the host of the news back then was this anchor called Deanie Petty, who had a talk show later on. Shout out to all the Canes I know. And and she was interviewing Harrison Ford. Mm-hmm. And she goes, so what about these new Star Wars movies that George Lucas is promising us, these prequel ones? And Harrison Ford's comment was, George knows how I feel about that. and they went into Indiana Jones, and that was that, which was great. But now that promise is coming through, and we are getting episode 1.
Yeah.
Where were you? I don't know if you know this, but where were you when you discovered the title, The Phantom Menace, and what was your impression?
I think I probably saw it on, do you remember the website Ain't It Cool News?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I think I saw it there. It's funny because my website predated him. And then I ended up kind of getting out of it for whatever reason. And I remember seeing that, and I remember thinking, if I'm being totally honest, I was like, what the hell does that mean? Yeah. Right? It wasn't like I could buy A New Hope, and even, I mean, honestly, if you think about it, A New Hope kind of fits in that same kind of category of what kind of a title for a standalone film is that? But I remember kind of being surprised by it, but again, that same sort of honest mindset of, yeah, it's weird, and I see a bunch of people complaining about it, but bring it. Let's see it. Let's see what it all means. Let's see what it does, and I'm sure I'm going to love it.
Yeah, I had the same feeling where I was like, that doesn't sound very Star Wars-y. Now, 20 years later, it
totally makes sense.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, perfect. It's perfect. So what about the first teaser trailer? Did you spend 3 hours downloading the QuickTime of that?
I was telling Bill Sheehy, I think I was on his show, and I was telling him the story where I remember, because back in those days, it was the old dial-up, and I remember I started downloading it before I left for work that morning. And when I came home ready to watch it, there was some sort of glitch because, it was 1997 or 99, 98, and it didn't download. So I was so pissed off. It ruined my night, and then I started again, had to watch it the next morning. But I remember seeing pictures of it, and I went to go see The Tale of Benjamin Button just to see the preview, or just to see the trailer. And the thing I remember most is the scene that the bit from the trailer that I remember most is the Anakin Skywalker meet Ben Kenobi and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Sorry, he wasn't Ben yet. And I remember I was like, oh, that is so cool. That's great. And I didn't know what to think of the Gungans and all that. Of course, there was nothing. We knew nothing about it, and but I remember just that. I remember the whole trailer, like top to bottom. I could see it again in my head. But that was the part that I remembered most, and I was so excited, and I couldn't wait to see it.
Well, as someone who was there from the beginning, that scene is the one. If you go back to A New Hope, the Obi-Wan speech in his little hut. That's the moment. You're like, this is going to kick everything off. That's it. It's such a...
Yep.
It's the more you know the movies, aren't entrenched with them, the more important that whole interaction is. And the more I can see in the trailer, you're like, all the action pieces aside, that would be the moment that would pull me the most. For me, it was just the gun get in the swamp.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that. Like, that was the first image we saw from new Star Wars, was this foggy swamp and these guys on these creatures, and that was really cool.
And I don't know how you felt watching it, but when I saw it, The Phantom Menace, for me it is, but for most people it's not their favorite prequel film. But I still feel there's a part of it that feels almost more Star Wars-y than the next two prequels. Yeah,
I can see that. I think maybe part of it is because it's so much on Tatooine.
Yeah.
I think, that's an interesting point. I think I agree with you, but I don't know why.
I don't know either.
Yeah.
Maybe Qui-Gon? Because he's so...
Maybe.
Tatooine.
I think it's, Attack of the Clones is so CGI heavy. And Revenge of the Sith is that story we waited to see for 20 years. So, I think I can't put my finger on it, but I think I agree with you on that one.
When you first saw the movie, you're in the theater now with your dad. You're watching it. Star Wars hits the screen.
Yeah.
You're 20 years older than the 7-year-old that saw A New Hope.
Yep.
This movie is definitely made for that 12-year-old.
Yep.
Where's your mindset? How did you feel coming out of that theater?
So I actually was at the New York City charity premiere for The Phantom Menace. I was covering it for Star Wars Galaxy magazine. And so I'm in the theater not just seeing Star Wars, but I'm at this beautiful theater in New York City surrounded by celebrities and surrounded by people who are in the movie. Like Natalie Portman was a handful of rows away from me. Pre-President Donald Trump was in there, Glenn Close, all these people. And so my perception of that movie, seeing it the first time, is colored by not just my excitement to see the movie, but my excitement to be in this really unique experience. And so I hope I'm not telling a story that you've heard before. You're probably not. But so I'm in the theater, and I remember there was literally a buzz of excitement because, I don't care if you're Donald Trump or Natalie Portman or John Leguizamo, who was near me as well. You're excited to see Star Wars, right? Star Wars is coming back. All these years, it's promised, it's returned. So there was excitement. The opening crawl comes, and people are like, I don't know what they're talking about with the Trade Federation and stuff. I wasn't expecting this, but that's cool. And then the Neimoidians come out with their politically incorrect accent, I guess maybe the best way to put it. And you could almost feel the excitement level of the theater dip.
Oh, wow.
Because honestly, this is a weird thing to say, but it's 100% true. I literally felt for a fleeting moment that like this was a joke and the real movie was going to start in a minute. And it's weird to admit that now in hindsight, but I do remember actually literally having that feeling like, wait a minute, what am I seeing here? But I think the movie itself has aged very differently for me, but I think first of all, there was such expectation for this movie. There was so much anticipation and what this movie should be for the fans who've been fans for 20 years and have been waiting since they were 7 to see this era. That as I walked out of the theater, I've told this story before. I'm walking out of the theater, and behind me is Christian Slater, who was one of my favorite actors at the time, and first of all, I was wearing a suit because I didn't know what you wear to a premiere. Everybody else was like cool New York, and I'm like wearing a suit, like with a vest. I didn't know. Let me say this: I did not look cool at all, but I was the best. But so I turned to Christian Slater, who looks at me, who's like, "Who is this guy? And why is he here? And should I know him?" And I said, "Christian, what did you think of the movie?" Because I was like, when am I going to get to talk to Christian Slater again? This isn't going to happen again. And he looks at me again, like dude in a suit. Don't know who he is. Is he a reporter? Is he an agent? Who is he? Somebody I should know? And he looks at me and he goes, "Visually stunning." And that was his only response to the movie. And in hindsight, it's the perfect answer, right? Because you don't have to say the movie was good or bad. There's no denying that at the time it was probably the most visually stunning movie ever created. Oh, yeah. I was talking to Jason Ward and Randy on Now This Is Podcasting about this experience, and I don't know if you recall, but nobody knew who was going to play Anakin in the next movie. Yeah. There were actually rumors that Christian Slater could have been that role. So in his mind too, he was like, "Yeah, it could be in this movie." But that was, I think, for me, I walked out of that movie talking myself into loving it because I wanted to love it. The second time I saw it, I saw all the flaws that have become sort of what it's known for those that want to find flaws, right? Some of the flat acting and blah, blah, blah. But the movie has aged really well for me. And there was a point where I didn't really want to watch it. And now actually I really kind of enjoy it. And I think it's partially because of what you said before. It's very... At the time, it wasn't as Star Wars-y to me, and now it's all Star Wars to me, and it sets the table really well.
I think what George Lucas does or did better than anybody was he made these timeless tales. In a lot of, like they're timeless. You watch it, you watch New Hope, you watch Empire, you watch Jedi, Phantom Menace. It doesn't matter how much time has passed. They still feel the same. They don't age really. Like they're just okay.
Well, and that's the over talked about but 100% correct benefit to doing a movie that takes place a long time ago versus a future movie, right? So any movie that takes place, I mean, Terminator. I love Terminator, but those days are past. I love Back to the Future, but we've already passed the date from Back to the Future. So, they're timeless from that respect. But they also they don't look like anything that you can compare them to, which is what works. And that's the amazing thing about the Star Wars universe is you can anything that's been coming out, whether it's the Clone Wars cartoon or any of the movies or what looks like The Mandalorian, it doesn't look like it feels like it belongs there, and it doesn't matter if it was made in 2019 or if it was made in 1977.
Exactly. It's Star Wars. That's what it's its own. It's its own.
That's what it is.
Star Wars.
That's right.
So a Phantom Menace comes and goes. You liked it. You liked it less than you wanted to admit. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think I liked it less than I talked myself into liking it, and then I became comfortable with not liking it, and then I started to really like it a lot.
I like that you became comfortable with not liking it. You're like, guys, it's good. I don't like this movie anymore.
You know what? We'll go with it. Let's see what happens next. Yeah.
So where's your anticipation for Attack of the Clones?
I think it was a little bit reduced because of the my group. This the same best friend of mine that we were so excited to talk about what's going to happen between Empire and Jedi. The same conversations were not as strong before Attack of the Clones, but I think there was this kind of there was a different layer that didn't exist in the 70s, and that was 70s and 80s, and that was we kind of hoped they got it right. And I hate to say that because now I look back differently at it, but at the time, if I'm being honest with my opinion, I think we were like, all right, Phantom Menace was not exactly what we expected, but this one's going to be it. This one's going to work. And plus, now you're starting to get into the Clone Wars, this thing that we were promised for so many years. So we expected to see the Clone Wars. I mean, it's Attack of the Clones, and so the anticipation for that was huge, especially then when we saw a picture of this blue Boba Fett, which looked pretty cool, and clips of what these clone troopers might look like. The expectation was super high.
Well, the name Phantom Menace might have thrown you off, but how into Attack of the Clones were you?
Well, again, we expected it to be the start of the Clone Wars, and I think that's where that movie missed. Now, it's cliched to say that Attack of the Clones is the least loved of the Star Wars films, but to me, I think it falls to the bottom of my list. Now, as I was saying before, I'm really curious to see how I seeing it with my daughter who's never seen that movie, and seeing if I see it differently. But to me, I always felt like Phantom Menace should have been the Qui-Gon Jinn movie, and Attack of the Clones should have been the Obi-Wan Kenobi movie, and Revenge of the Sith should have been Anakin's movie. And I think part of the problem with Attack of the Clones is it tried to be so many different things, and it couldn't settle on what it wanted to be as a film.
I think that's
yeah.
For me, we do every New Year's Day. We do a top 10 rankings or a top. I guess it was 10 this year. Every year we do a top however many live action films there are, and so there's like 5 to 10 of us. Or now it's even more because of our patrons. We include them, but we kind of add them all up. So if you vote Return of the Jedi 1, it gets 10 votes. So we add it up. Attack of the Clones every time is at the bottom. But this year, I'm going to admit this because I don't care. Attack of the Clones was in my top 5.
Really?
I said, yeah. And you know what? So the way I do my list is just like Jason Fry said on your show is his 10th favorite, right?
Right.
So what I do is I'm like, if I'm going to put in Star Wars today in my VCR, DVD, Blu-ray, digital, whatever, what do I want to watch?
Right.
And that's how I do it. And Attack of the Clones, there was a period of time when it was the one that I always wanted to watch. And when people mention Star Wars to me, my mind, and I don't know why, there's a few things, but the first thing it goes to is that chase, the speeder chase on Coruscant against Zam Wesell at the beginning with Jango. And it goes to that. And if my mind goes to that, I hate the droid factory sequence. I don't even want to talk about that. But if my mind is going to that one sequence, and I think about that movie very fondly, and when I first saw it, I saw the midnight show, and I was very disappointed in that movie.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, but I want to watch it. I genuinely want to watch Attack of the Clones. Skip the Droid Factory, but watch the movie. It's weird. I don't know I haven't watched it with a kid. No one has changed my mind. It's just me. I've just kind of grown into it, I guess.
I think the thing that might make it more watchable for me is the fact that there is so much Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi in that movie, and Ewan has come to own that character, and again, I feel like The Last Jedi is a very small-ish story, personal story. I feel like Attack of the Clones, if they weren't so hell-bent on creating a love story between Anakin and Padme, it could have been a really cool sort of uncovering the mystery of who ordered the clones and all this other thing, and it would have been a cool Obi-Wan movie. So to that end, yes, I would watch it just because I love Obi-Wan. And General Grievous, I didn't like the first time I saw him, but I've come to really kind of dig his character. I don't know why. I just like him a lot. Again, I'm really curious because this weekend I'm going to watch it with my daughter, and I'm really curious to see how it strikes me now.
Oh, I can't wait to. You got to tell me how that goes.
I'll let you know. I'll send you a message.
Because it's grown on me. But so like you said, you're watching this movie. It's not the Clone Wars. They create clones from Jango Fett, but it's Boba Fett. They're kind of shoehorning him in there. Like, Boba's in here. Everybody applaud. Jar Jar's role is basically nothing.
Yep.
I mean, he does create the Empire, but he does very very little.
It's all his fault.
Yeah, it is. That's what I think is the genius of George Lucas. He's like, oh, you didn't like Jar Jar? Guess what? He's the most important character in this story. Take it. So you were disappointed by it, though. Yeah. Obviously. Were you more disappointed by this than The Phantom Menace, or did you still feel like it was a step up?
I think I felt like it was a step up because I felt like it was, again, by my current standards, it's not, but at the time, I think I felt there was, because I felt like there was more action in it or something. Mm-hmm. There was more, it had that gigantic weird fight at the end with 100 Jedi swinging sabers in an arena and everything. So I think there was more to latch on to in Attack of the Clones. I mean, I hate to be cliched, but I still can't dig the Yoda jumping around like a frog scene. But I did like when it was Dooku against Obi-Wan and Anakin. I thought that was kind of a cool fight. So I think there's just more to kind of latch on to for some reason, or there was at the time.
Well, I understand that as the more I watch it, I latch. It's got moments, it does have the moments. And I think the sum of all the parts, when you put all what will be 9, 11, depending how you look at it, together, I think they do work very well. And that's what I think when you start with 4, 5, and 6, and those ones are so iconic, I think that's when you kind of lose out on 1, 2, and 3 a little bit.
Yep.
And it's curious to see your daughter's perspective going watching all of them now, how it's going to be, because she won't have any opinions. She'll be unopinionated going into it, right? So it's pure. It'll be a pure thought and opinion. And I think that's a great one to have. So please let me know how that goes.
Yeah, I definitely will.
Unless she comes out, that was the worst thing I've ever seen. Why'd you make me watch that?
If she says it, we'll know it's true.
Yeah, well, that's Well,
I mean, not to you, but to everybody else.
To everybody else, yeah. I'll still maintain it's the best. But I watched the Rise of Skywalker trailer with my 9-year-old nephew.
Uh-huh.
And when Kylo Ren stabs that guy in the woods,
he
just goes, he's a good guy now. Like his mind, he's not. There's no impressions on him. No one said anything. That's just where his mind went. I was like, okay, you probably know more than I do, because the mind of a child, right? Like, just innocent.
Right.
Like, you see it for what it is at face value. Whereas I'm like, well, in that scene, if actually you look at the framing, that would.
You'll notice there's some stormtroopers running in the background, so perhaps there's
Yeah, exactly. The stormtroopers are pointed parallel to. Okay, well, we'll just bypass the rest of Attack of the Clones. You've seen it. You've moved on from it.
Yes.
When did you stop with Star Wars Galaxy magazine?
It was pretty soon after Phantom Menace. There was a couple. It was interesting. There was a situation where I think I just kind of got burned out. I had a story that I was writing for the Star Wars Adventure Journal and which was for West End Games, and I was really excited about that, and I was really going. And it's like when you're excited about something and then it doesn't happen, you kind of get a little bit turned off. And so my story was about to be published, and then West End Games got out of the Star Wars business literally overnight, and so my story never saw the light of day. So I kind of got like a little bit. It's hard. It's depressing now, and I look back and I'm like, geez, I wish I didn't get sort of turned off. But I was turned off by the whole situation. So I think the last thing I covered was officially was around the Phantom Menace. However, I kept all my connections, and I did go to the New York premiere of Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith as well. So I was at least still a part of it. I just wasn't, getting paid by the word to enjoy it.
So Revenge of the Sith, the best title of the prequel trilogy. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yes. Yeah.
Maybe even of the saga so far.
Yeah, I might say that. Yeah,
it's up there. It's definitely it's powerful. It's a good one.
Yeah.
So you're going to Revenge of the Sith. You know how it's going to end. That's the one thing that the prequels had going maybe against it was we knew where it was all going, and so you go in, war hits the screen on the crawl.
Yeah. Yep.
Can you just walk me through your experience watching that one?
Yeah, so that one I went into the city to New York City to see that premiere with my best friend who I saw Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back with. I took him in to see it, and my brother-in-law, who's an average Star Wars fan, right? He likes it, but he's not he's not over the top like you and I are, and so we were at the premiere for that, and that was a ton of fun. And I still think that opening fight sequence in space, I can watch that over and over and over and over and over again. And it was overwhelming, but it was so well done. And I was drawn in immediately. It's funny, like with Attack of the Clones, I remember that the camera pans up instead of down, and that was jarring. And to me, that sort of says everything you need to know about Attack of the Clones. It's a Star Wars movie, but it's different.
I thought it was a weird choice. It's still a weird choice to this day. That's the only one.
The only one, and I think they were trying to I don't even know what they were trying to do, but it didn't work for me. But that opening battle, yeah, you're sucked in, and things that movie it starts there, and it's pretty relentless. Mm-hmm. And I remember I felt like pieces of the final lightsaber battle, I felt like were a little drawn out, but I still just loved it because that was that scene we had been waiting for 25 years. And so it kind of, we walked out of that one kind of like, okay, the prequels redeemed themselves, right? Because, again, the mindset I was for those movies at the time is very different than where I am now with those movies. But to me, it was like, okay, they got it right. They did everything they were supposed to. They delivered on all the promises. I didn't agree with all the story choices, but I totally, unlike Last Jedi fans who, yell and abuse people who don't agree with them, but I walked out and I was like, yeah, they did it. The prequels came together by the time they had all ended. So it was a devastatingly sad ending that was really a happy ending for Star Wars fans because it was what we wanted.
Yeah, and look, Luke and Leia went to their homes, so it all works out in the end. If if you're gonna watch Episode 4 after that, if you're not, it sucks. Now Star Wars is over.
Yep.
It's done. Revenge of the Sith. That's it. Done. Not gonna happen.
It's all over. That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So where were you in fandom at that point? Did you kind of just slip away from it? Did you stick with it for a little bit?
So yeah, I kind of, I was still I was with it for a while. It was, the funny thing is about Star Wars is it's always been there in one form or another for me. It's always been, I've always been drawn to, you're walking through a garage sale and, my wife's looking at, I don't know, kitchen utensils or pillows, and I'm like, they have an old snow speeder here. I think I'm gonna get that. So it's always there. And then my kids were born, and I introduced my daughter at like 3 years old, which is probably bad parenting, to the original Star Wars, and
probably great parenting.
She wasn't as into it, but yeah, I'll take it for that. Yeah, so I had it was, again, it was kind of always there, but there was, until the announcement of the Disney acquisition, there was no hope that we were going to ever see Star Wars again. I mean, that was it. We had these books, and we had these, I guess, was the Clone Wars, were they done by the time that came out? I can't remember.
Clone Wars is still going on during the Disney acquisition. That's when they axed it. They said no more, and then the fans cried out, and they were like, "It's coming back. Don't worry, we love you." Yeah.
So yes, but there was still not. It wasn't. I enjoyed the Clone Wars, but I wasn't as crazy about them as I might have been.
Did you know that were you into like the rumors and the underground knowing of, they were going to make the Star Wars Underworld live action TV show, and it was going to be the most expensive show?
And I was also waiting for the 1313 video game and that sort of thing, and so I was kind of connected to that, and there was always hope for that, but it was like it had a different feel to it because it was a sort of branching off from the movies, and it's funny that even with the highest quality television series and animation series, there's still something to those tentpole movies that's just so important.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what I think. We'll get into this later on, but the Solo for me is, I loved Solo, but it didn't have that tentpole event film feel to it.
Yeah, I would say the same thing for Rogue One. Yep, they were good movies, but they weren't. They didn't have the same sort of weight.
I think the difference with Rogue One and Solo is Rogue One was the first of these spin-offs, so everybody was kind of like, whoa, let's find out what this is about.
Yeah, what's going to happen. Yeah.
Whereas Solo was like, yeah, I'll catch it later. And they did. And they did. Their wallet spoke, yeah. Yep. They definitely did. Okay, so Star Wars is dead. You're in the second dark times now. Mm-hmm. And Disney has... I'll never forget where I was. I was sitting at my desk at work, just twiddling on I think it was on my phone. Mm-hmm. Disney... to acquire Lucasfilm, $4 billion. I think I threw my phone at the floor, and I sent a message to my dad and my friend Brock, who I do Rebel Scum podcast with, and I'm like, oh my God. And they were like, seriously, like this is... And it was super exciting from what I thought was just because of what they were able to do with Iron Man at the time and the Marvel characters, which I don't even think it was called the MCU yet. It might have been, but the early stages. And I was like, I 100% trust Disney getting Star Wars. So do you know where you were and what your initial thoughts were on that?
Totally. I think it was after Hurricane Sandy, which was a big deal on the East Coast. And we didn't have power in my house. So my son was a couple months old, and so my wife, son, and daughter, who was 3 years old, were staying at my brother-in-law's because he had power, and I was like pretending I was living in the wilderness, waiting for the zombie apocalypse, staying at my house. I was like, nobody's going to take my house, and so I had my phone, and I was flipping through social media, and I saw it pop up, and my initial reaction was, "This is great. This is great news," and of course, it's so funny. It was sort of like the beginning of the internet trolls from that day, because immediately there were people who were like, Disney and Star Wars, they're going to ruin it. And I was like, how come people are so angry about this already? They know nothing about it. I was just so excited to know that we're going to get 7, 8, and 9. And to me, it was nothing but great news. Yeah,
they immediately said, we're going to do episode 7, and Michael Arndt's writing it. What?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Where did this come from?
Yep. Yeah, it was like there was not only were they telling us that Disney bought Lucasfilm, but we have a movie coming out that you've been waiting for 15 years, and it's already in production or pre-production, and it was like, well, what? This was great. So yeah.
Yeah, it was such a wild time, and it was like, okay, what is next? How did you feel though? Because George Lucas, like the prequels or not, it's him. The Star Wars is so Lucas, right? Like
Yeah.
all six of them at the time were so George Lucas. So how did you feel about his involvement, kind of not being involved?
Well, coming off the prequels, I remember me and a couple of my writer friends. One of the things we had said was it would have been great if George Lucas was to hand off his story to somebody else to write. So I was excited to hear it because I've always been of the mindset that whether it was the prequels or stories that were unrelated to the saga, I would have loved to have seen him say, "Here you go, try this out and see what you do with it." And so to me, it was very exciting. I was actually, again, I was still not in the same spot that I am today with the prequels, and so not to say I didn't enjoy them. I was starting to come around, but I still was of this mindset that George gave us the prequels, and they weren't everything we wanted them to be. And so yeah, let's see what somebody else can do with this universe. In fairness, though, I didn't know what somebody could do with this universe.
Yeah.
There's no precedent for that up until JJ came out with The Force Awakens. So it was a little bit unsettling, but at the same time super exciting to me.
Yeah, I agree with that, because it was, my one thing was, okay, is this just going to feel like a fan film? Like, what is this going to be? I was so curious about it. But what I want to get into the movie, and we are running late, but but for me, because a lot of people say, oh, I wanted Luke, Han, and Leia. It was weird for me, and maybe because of my love for the prequels, that's not where my mind initially went. I couldn't even think of what they were going to do. I knew obviously Han, Luke, and Leia were going to be involved, especially when they said Harrison Ford was coming back. I thought that was a huge deal, especially going back to the interview that I told you that I saw from '84. I thought that was a massive deal, and immediately I said, well, he's going to get killed off, because that's just how it's
Well, he wanted that back in Return of the Jedi.
Exactly.
So I was not surprised.
Yeah, you knew that was coming, so let's cut Kylo Ren some slack. He was just doing Harrison Ford a favor.
He had to kill him.
Yeah, but what did you have expectations going into 7?
Now, like you, I didn't expect to see. I think it was after seeing Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull.
Yeah,
I was kind of like, it was the first time I kind of came to terms with the fact that my childhood heroes were aging, and so I expected honestly to see a bigger role for Mark Hamill. But I wasn't. I knew and actually wanted to see some new characters. And that's why I think the bogus kind of desire to have seen Billy D and Harrison and Carrie and Mark on adventures again is that's literally living in the past. And it was, I think, the role of Harrison and Carrie in The Force Awakens was perfect. I would have liked to have seen more Mark, but I can, the way it ended up, I think it was fine.
Well, I think the one, I don't want to call it a mistake, but the one thing that it did though was it put a lot of emphasis on Luke Skywalker. Like, he's so important to everything that's going on. I think that's the one thing where I'm with you. I was very excited about these new characters that we're going to get, that we had when that first teaser dropped, which we'll talk about in a second. We didn't know who they were, but I was like, bring it. I don't care.
Yeah.
And I did not care. I didn't even realize we didn't see anybody until somebody wrote an article. And I was like, oh, yeah.
Where are they?
Where are the old characters? I don't even care. Who is this Who's this guy in a stormtrooper? I love, because my big thing with Star Wars is I love stormtroopers. And when Luke and Han take the helmets off, it's one of my favorite images. It's just the unmasked stormtroopers. So I'm like, we're going to get one of those as a main character? Bring it. I'm in. That's my... So that's where I was at. But I think just the emphasis on Luke might be the one thing that maybe they'll look back on and say, in hindsight.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I think after 9, people will look at The Last Jedi and be like, oh, okay, it wasn't as bad as I thought. For those that don't like it. I mean, I still love it, but I can definitely see where where people sit on that.
Yeah, me too. But I think from everything I've seen of Rise of Skywalker, which is a lot, in that one teaser trailer, I think it's gonna. I'm just really excited for it. So the first teaser trailer for The Force Awakens drops. I think it was the Friday after American Thanksgiving, as we call it here in Canada. I was leaving the gym and I got this tweet, and I was like, "What?" And I had to watch it in the car.
Yep.
You obviously know where you were. You know what your emotions were. Talk about that.
Yeah. So I remember finding what the title was. I think it was tweeted out, and I was in LA at some conference, and I remember sort of sitting there in the conference and flipping through my phone, kind of bored of what was going on, and it was like The Force Awakens, and much like The Phantom Menace, my first thought was, all right, I like it better than The Phantom Menace, but I was like, I had no idea what that meant. But then the trailer, I remember I knew that it had dropped on the internet, but I waited until I got home to see it because I wanted to go to the Apple TV trailer thing and watch it on my big screen. I didn't want to have the phone experience with it. And I swear I must have watched it 10, 12 times in a row, just like back to back to back to back to back. And I remember watching it with my son and daughter, and they both were both like Ian McDermott at the at Celebration. They were like, do it again, do it again, do it again. And we watched it over and over. And again, my mind immediately, like you, was like, who's that stormtrooper? Who's that? What's that little orange robot? Looks totally awesome. That's the Falcon. Oh my God. And so, and I remember watching it and being like, they got the radar dish on it. It's a different one, but they got the radar dish on it. So just like little details that ran right into. But it was, I was immediately, JJ definitely captured that tone even in the trailer and sucked you right back in.
Absolutely. And do you remember when that trailer dropped and it starts off with Snoke's voice and it was like, there's been an awakening. That's my Snoke impression. It's very good.
It's very good. That's really good.
Thank you. I was up for the role. I lost out. But he's like, have you felt it? And people were like, that's Benedict Cumberbatch. Do you remember?
I thought for sure it was Benedict Cumberbatch.
Everyone did.
Totally.
Which is so Matt Smith in The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
Because he's not in it, but he might be in it. But nobody knows. So we'll fast forward a little bit to Chewie We're Home. Star Wars Celebration Anaheim. I know you haven't been to a celebration yet, but did you watch the panels online at all?
I did. So the office I was working at the time was an open space office, which means nobody had an office, but they had these little rooms where you could go and work. So I literally booked myself a room for 4 hours, and I just sat in the room and I watched, pretended to be doing my day job and watched it. And yeah, I remember seeing the trailer with everybody on the panel remotely, and just all I remember is the Chewie We're Home part. I know there was more to that trailer, but that's the only part that I remember from it.
It was so memorable.
Yeah, totally.
It didn't matter what came before it. As that moment happens, you're like, oh.
Yeah,
Star Wars is back, because I think Harrison Ford and then Chewie beside him. You're just like, oh, okay, this is my Star Wars. I get it.
Yeah. Well, and I remember, of course, BB-8 and the little guy from Jakku coming out on the stage, the little scavenger guy.
Yeah.
And just like, wow, Star Wars is back, and it's not CGI madness. It's real. It's here.
The fact that they brought BB-8 on stage blew my. Now they have Dio on stage. I don't even know how that thing moved. I was like, what is that?
They're making technological advances just for movies now.
Yeah, it's remarkable. So you haven't been to a celebration. Did that make you wish you were at a celebration watching
Yes, it definitely did. And it's funny. It's just that it never seemed to be at the right time or the right place. And this year I considered going, but I was a little late to the party, and I actually was in Europe when Celebration happened, so I wasn't able to go anyway. But because I thought about it last minute, I was like, is there a way that I can make this work out? Because I have gotten back into sort of this deep fandom engagement that I used to have when I was working for Star Wars Galaxy. I've revisited that with recently with the podcast and the release of this fan fiction novel that I wrote, and just really getting into talking to fans. I wanted to go and be there with them in Chicago, and so I definitely wish I've been to one, and I can't wait for Anaheim. I'm already ready to order my tickets Friday at noon and go from there.
Your bags are packed. You're
You're
waiting at the door.
You're
like,
right.
There's a year to go. I don't care. I'm waiting.
Well, it's funny because it actually falls. The first day is my daughter's birthday, and I told her, I was like, celebration is on your birthday, and she's like, can we go? And I was like, yes, we could definitely go.
You are mine. That is an awesome moment. I was just, my first instinct was, okay, well, it's gonna be really hot, but it's gonna be air conditioned, so we're good.
Right.
We're good.
Exactly. And it's right next to Galaxy's Edge, so there's that too.
I don't even want to think about that. I'm so excited for Galaxy's Edge.
I know.
I don't even vegan blue milk. I don't know what it is, but I'm gonna have 4 of them. I might even get a green one and just be like, I hope you get to milk your own green milk though. That's what.
See, that would be cool.
Yeah, the dispenser.
Yeah.
It's a space cow dispenser.
And you got to grow a beard like I have so that you could like do the thing that Luke does and just let it just drip out of your face.
I want to talk to you about that sequence in a little bit. So Force Awakens, all this fun stuff's happening. The trailer was on Monday Night Football, which you do like football. So were you going to watch that game anyway? It was a Giants game, wasn't it?
It was a Giants game, I think. Yeah. So I was watching the game anyway, but I do remember just like how long they milked it. Just like, come on, bring it on. I want to see the trailer. And then, of course, I think, was that the first movie you were able to order tickets online that far in advance? I can't remember.
I don't know how it was for you, but for us, no. But it was the first one that I ever saw that actually sold out that early.
Yeah, right. Like in October or November, whenever that was. Yeah.
October, yeah. It was insane because my friend's like, it's going to sell it. I was like, nah, don't worry about it. And then he's like, by the way, there's 3 tickets left. Do you want them? I'm like, we need 7.
Yeah.
Did you buy tickets right away?
Oh, I did. Yeah. In fact, I think I bought them for like 3 of the days of that weekend because, again, I keep going back to this buddy of mine, me and him and a bunch of, we now sort of have this tradition that we've done for the last 4 movies where that the Friday opening day, we all take off of work and we get like an 11 a.m. show.
Yeah.
And we all go and go to the movie, and then we go to a bar afterwards and hang out. And but it's it's become tradition with me and these old school buddies of mine that still live in New Jersey, and we do it's become sort of this pilgrimage. And it's also cool because the other tradition that now comes with that is usually the Saturday, the opening weekend. I take my kids and my nephew and his dad, who went to go see Revenge of the Sith with me, and we all go see whatever the Star Wars movie is, and usually like on a 9:30 show on a Saturday. And but it's cool. I mean, it's cool how Star Wars traditions sort of happen or are renewed or continue. So
yeah, it's awesome. I have a tradition with Brock, who I do Rebel Scum with. We take the day off, and the Saga Films in Toronto, they've actually had a pop-up shop, so we go there in the morning, and then we just wait for 7 hours for the movie to start. We're like, Star Wars is awesome. And then we put on Caravan of Courage, the Ewok movie, or something stupid. And we're like, this is why we like it, because of Ewoks. And they'll never show up on film ever again. So Force Awakens comes. Were you immediately in love with that movie?
From the very, very beginning. From the absolute beginning. And it wasn't lost on me either that it was basically beat for beat A New Hope. And I actually thought that was a good thing. And a lot of people use that as a criticism.
Yeah.
But the way I look at it is, Star Wars needed to be rebooted in a way, right? The prequels, I mean, even the line that Laura Santeca says it's a very thinly veiled commentary on Star Wars with this will begin to make things right. And I think that was kind of a promise to the older fans in a way. And again, I have no prequel hate, but it's just, they felt different to my sort of group of fans. And so, but I felt like it was smart to reboot the film without trying to remake it and connecting it in a way. I mean, I don't know if it's on my website or not, but I had written a piece where I kind of talk a little bit about, each little thing that's exactly like A New Hope. I mean, right down to putting the data card in the little robot and putting him off on a mission. I mean, that's A New Hope, and the bad guy in black enters the scene and interrogates somebody. I mean, it's all there, but it was great, and I felt like I it had what it had that the prequels didn't have. And seems to be a recurring theme in conversations, is the prequels didn't, nobody was having fun in the prequels. Whereas within a couple minutes of the movie, you have Poe Dameron with the "Who talks first? You talk first." It's just hard to understand you with all the apparatus. Like that was funny stuff, and that's what Star Wars was missing. So I was immediately back in, and I loved the Phantom or the Force Awakens. I loved everything about it. I still do. I could watch it every day if it was on.
I'll hold you to that one day. I'll put.
Okay, so now you're watching it for 24 straight hours.
I will just breeze past Rogue One. Did you like Rogue One?
I did. I didn't like it as much as Solo, in hindsight, but I liked it. It was a good Star Wars movie, but yeah,
the Vader scene
didn't have the same effect. The Vader scene was gratuitous. I liked it, but it was. I know so many people absolutely love it. But I'll tell you what my biggest problem with it, and I hate to be one of those nitpickers that I always give a hard time to, but he was such a badass in Rogue One, and then he faced Obi-Wan, and he was like a little bit slow. So here's what I would have done. Not that anybody asked me, but what I would have done was I would have had Vader get injured at the end.
Yeah.
So that explained why he was a little bit slower in his approach to lightsaber battles, because he goes from I love the way he ripped apart those rebels. I thought that was amazing, but something should have happened so that it made that connection.
Oh, so you don't have the special edition where they're actually one of the rebel soldiers planted a bomb on the ship, and actually it blows up and his body floats in space, and yeah,
they have to put it back together. He goes to the Death Star.
He does what Leia does in Last Jedi, and he guides himself back to the star.
But there's no denying that end battle. So I'll have to do this someday and rank all the space battles. But the space battle at the end of Rogue One may be the best ever. That and Revenge of the Sith, the beginning, are just so awesome, so well done.
Yeah, I like Rogue One a lot. But I like it. It's different from it's like Solo. I love Solo, but it's different. I felt like I was reading the Solo books from the 90s more than watching a sequel or prequel to Return of the Jedi. It's a different thing. Speaking of different things, sorry.
No, I was gonna say I totally agree. They're great movies. I loved everything about them, but they don't carry the same weight.
Yeah, they put them on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
One movie though that everybody unanimously loves is this little film called The Last Jedi. And I don't want to breeze through it, but we've been going really long, so we will breeze through it a little bit.
I apologize for that.
That's my fault. So this movie, I was at Star Wars Celebration Orlando when this trailer dropped, and I saw Rian Johnson there, and I did not sleep in the halls, but I saw on Facebook how he came out and he was so excited. And on the stage, he was so excited, and I wasn't in that room because I didn't sleep overnight there. But I saw him on the Star Wars show stage, their YouTube show, and we watched it there. And he was so excited, and I was with everyone I do the podcast with, and the trailer came, and I was a small amount disappointed in the trailer that Luke would want to end the Jedi, only because I felt like that was obvious going into that point.
Right.
And then the movie came, and the movie ended. And for me, I'll tell you, my first impression was, okay, I think I liked it. That's how it was. It wasn't as excited as I was after the Phantom Menace, but I wasn't as disappointed as I was in Attack of the Clones. I was like, this is something. I love the Praetorian Guard scene to death, but there are moments of it that I just felt were off. And I remember talking to my wife Erin, and she was at Celebration. She saw Rian Johnson. She goes, I really wanted to like it more because he had me so excited. and I know you like The Last Jedi, but I just want you to walk me through your experience of watching this one.
Yeah, I mean it's become one of my favorite of the films, but totally honestly, I mean, much like I walked out of the Phantom Menace talking myself into liking it. I went to the Thursday night showing with with my neighbor. He's got kids the same age as my kids, but he and I always go see all the Marvel and Star Wars movies on the Thursday night without the kids, so we can go and enjoy them as adults, and then go bring the kids and get up for bathroom breaks with them. But I remember I walked out and I said to him, that was both the best Star Wars movie I ever saw and the worst, because I was so conflicted after I saw it. And I wasn't conflicted for the reasons that the traditional haters are. Like, I don't at all disagree with the choices of Luke. I totally get it. But to me, it felt like I still have trouble with the entire crate sequence, or not crate, the Canto Bight sequence. I can't. I just there. If they left that out, it would not have been missed. I felt like, though, the movie actually kind of ends in a way that you could have ended the saga right there.
Yeah.
Right. It ends with, and there's still hope, and we can go, and evil always returns, but there's always still hope. The end. Right. You could have ended it right there. But what I really do like about it is that it was in a saga full of big, gigantic, galactic stories. It's an incredibly small, personal movie. It's the story of Rey trying to discover herself. It's the story of Kylo Ren, Ben Solo trying to figure out what his choices mean. It's Luke Skywalker coming to terms with his failure as a Jedi Master. So it's all these very small, personal stories that I think that's what's jarring for people too. And I think at the end of the day, it's a movie full of failure.
Yes.
Every single person in that movie failed. Hux, Kylo Ren, Luke. I mean, Luke ends up winning, but I mean, even Rey wasn't very good at learning about the Force. So it's a hard sort of movie to take in. That being said, as I mentioned before, The Empire Strikes Back as a middle chapter left a lot of things unanswered that the internet would have destroyed today. So it's my hope that everybody who has a big problem with Return or the Last Jedi, after Episode 9 will look back at it and be like, okay, it makes sense. But I think the problem is, like, I felt like the Rose and Finn story just didn't work at all, and there was missed opportunities as well with the story that are pretty gaping in a way. Like, for example, if it was me, and obviously I've never created a blockbuster film, so I have no right to say this, but the whole Maz Kanata thing made no sense. Like, putting her in just to put her in felt weird. And instead of DJ, it should have been Lando. That's my kind of thing on that. At least it would have made sense to bring him back into the movie, and then the sequence would have made more sense. But
I've said a million times about Maz. I don't understand this character anymore. I totally lost. Like, that scene, I rewatched Last Jedi a little while ago, and they're like, "Can you help us?" And she says, "Yes, but I can't because I'm in a union dispute." What? Why just say yes? Just say yes and do it. Like, you're a character in a movie. Just I don't understand it.
Yeah,
like,
they could have just called her up on the phone, and she could have been just hanging out wherever she was. She didn't have to be shooting stuff.
I felt like she was there because she was contracted to be in that movie, and they had to put her in. Like, it just it just frustrates me. And my other problem with it, I don't know how you feel, but I thought Rey, they changed her narrative from my parents are coming back to I don't know who they are. Like, she never asked who her parents were in The Force Awakens. We did, but she didn't. And so I was always confused by that watching. I was like, but she never asked that question. And now this is like her whole thing. So, I mean, look, we all know Han is her father because that's been...
Right. It's been proven on the internet, so it's definitely happening.
Yeah, I have a thing where if I just say Reylo, I could put Reylo in the title of anything, and that's immediately clickbait, and it gets me my views.
So we'll talk about it for a minute. You can put it in your headline.
Exactly. That's how it works. You just say Reylo. No, but those were my biggest complaints from it. Where it was Maz and Rey's narrative felt like it shifted a little bit. So, but I'm gonna hold all, and I rewatched and I actually liked it a lot more. 2 years, a year and a half, whatever it is later. than I did in the theater. And I liked it in the theater, but I liked it a lot more now. And I think because also that anticipation and all, it's not there anymore. I know what's coming. So the jokes that I thought were flat, they kind of worked a little. They didn't work, but they just didn't bother me anymore.
Yeah, well, I think there's two things that again, at the end of the day, I think it was a very interesting and very well crafted movie. I think the problem I have again is the whole Canto Bight scene, and I also feel like the movie, the pacing is a little strange. You have the big battle, then you have a little bit of a lull, and then when you think the movie's over, you still get that whole crate scene, which again I thought was a really cool battle. But it feels like it's a post credit scene in a way for me. But I mean, it works, but it's just paced strangely.
It definitely is. That's one of my biggest complaints too, and I mentioned that on the first review I did for it. I was like, and it's funny because Rian Johnson tweeted out, I think a month before it came out, or whenever he finished picture lock on it, he said, "This has the least amount of wipes of all the Star Wars."
Yeah,
and maybe it would have benefited from a couple more, just to like give some breathing room. Because every time, for me, especially on the rewatch, it's like, "Where's Rey? Where's Finn? Where's Poe?" Poe wakes. It's like, okay, calm down. Let's breathe, like Luke says. Just show me an exterior shot and a nice establishing shot, and let's move on from there. Speaking of moving on, this you hated The Last Jedi so much that you did a fan fiction. But you did do some fan fiction.
I did.
Let's go into that. How did that start?
So I'd always said that The Phantom Menace felt to me like the movie version of a good book that didn't quite get it right.
That's a great way to put it.
So I had mentioned before that I had done this story for the Star Wars Adventure Journal, and I happened to come across it a year and a half ago, and I was telling a friend of mine about it, and he's like, "Oh, that sounds interesting. Let me see it." And so I shared it with him, and then I also I just for fun one afternoon I wrote the first chapter of what became my fan fiction story, and I sent it to him too, and he was like, "This is great. You got to finish this." And I don't think it was great, but it was good enough to inspire me. And so what I did was I wanted to expand upon the Phantom Menace story, because at the end of the day, as I was saying, interestingly, as I was saying at the beginning, that Phantom Menace should have been Qui-Gon's story. And I always kind of believed that Phantom Menace was Qui-Gon's story until I started taking it apart and realized it's actually Palpatine and Sidious's story. And so I wrote I basically used every piece of dialogue from the film. Most of the characters are in my version of it, but I've also added characters like Sifo Dyas, and reference other things that happen. I give what I believe is it's a non-canon backstory to Darth Maul, but a little bit more information there, and explore things like what was Palpatine doing on Coruscant while things were going bad on his planet, and what was he doing behind the scenes to set up all these things that, everything that happens in the Phantom Menace happens because of him, whether he's doing it as Sidious or he's doing it as Palpatine. So I really wanted to dig into what's happening there and what's going on with the Jedi, that they're who on the Jedi Council is ignoring all these very clear signs that something is going wrong, and so I just decided to write it, and what I thought would take me years is just some silly side project. I ended up writing 123,000 words in about 8 or 10 months, and finished it. And the thing that pisses me off most is I put all this effort into a story that I can never make any money off of. No. But what was cool about it was I worked with my friend who sort of edited it chunk by chunk, and he would ask questions, are you filling in a plot hole here, or is this, we talked more and more about the story. And then when I released it, I was like, where am I going to put this? Now that I've gotten this thing done, and it's nice that it's sitting on my laptop, but what do I do with it? So I got back into social media and just sort of put it out there. And that was where I started to rediscover all these great podcasts and all these interesting people in the fandom. So I know of one person who read the book. I know Kyle Larson from Star Wars Newsnet read it because he reviewed it on their site. so I feel good that one person read it and liked it, and that's ultimately what it's all about. But if nothing else, it got me back to being connected and finding these kind of fans that, frankly, when I was writing for Star Wars Galaxy and we wanted to do stories on them, we had to really dig to find this guy in Florida or this guy in upstate New York or whatever who had these unique fandoms, and it's led me back to having great conversations and doing my own podcast and joining people like you on your podcast and reigniting these conversations and rediscovering the Star Wars fandom. So the book was fun. It's available for free on my website, and of course it's free, but it's available in like Kindle or iBooks, whatever version you want to read. And it's sort of my love letter to the story, and frankly, it's made me look at the Phantom Menace a little differently. And now I look at it and I'm like, yeah, well, this is why that happened. Everybody else is like, that doesn't make any sense. But in my head canon has now become
it's your own personal canon.
Yeah,
everybody has their own canon, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. Are you going to do Attack of the Clones or Revenge of the Sith?
I've thought about it, but I don't think so. I think it's yeah, probably not, because one of the things I set up in the story that is sort of very subtle, and it might be worth sort of discovering, is I think one of the interesting fan theories is that something was happening between Obi-Wan and Padme, which I think was a very interesting concept, but I don't know if I feel like doing all the effort to explore it and write it. But yeah, I don't think so, but you never know. I might wake up one afternoon and just start writing it. Next thing I know, 10 months later, it'll be done. But I'll tell you what, I think if I was to do it, I would combine Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith into one bigger story.
Okay, that I could see that. That makes sense to me, actually.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, I'm looking forward to that, so I'm going to hold you to it.
I'll get right to work on it.
All right, we're going to wrap this up. One thing I like to do on this show is, I don't know if you've ever seen Inside the Actor Studio with James Lipton. I've actually never done this, but he asks 10 questions. Now, you do this too on yours over there on the other side of the galaxy. I'll say that. Across the galaxy. Around the galaxy. Yeah. All the way over there on that side of the galaxy.
In the U.S. versus
the U.S. side of the galaxy. So I'm going to ask you just a couple of what you ask.
Okay,
and we talked about this a little bit. If you had to choose one, would you choose an Ewok, a Porg, or Jar Jar Binks?
I think I'm going to have to go Ewok, just because it's classic trilogy, and I didn't have a problem with them like everybody else did. So I'll go with Ewok.
All right, sounds good to me. I was going to ask you your favorite sound effect, but you gave that one away earlier. What's your favorite Star Wars quote?
I was afraid you were going to ask me that. I don't know which one to go with. I think I might have to go with. Let me take a second on this one. I don't want to say anything cheesy like "do or do not" because everybody does that one. I think I'm going to go with boring conversation anyway.
Nice. Yes.
Because that's one I feel like I can use just about every single day. But I love. That was pure Han Solo.
That's perfect, and it's one of the best moments in Star Wars. I don't care what anyone says.
I agree.
Yeah,
totally.
right off the bat. What's another good one that we haven't talked about yet? If let's say your favorite movie, TV show, or book.
I'm gonna have to go with Empire Strikes Back, just because. Not just because I think it's the best written movie, but I think it's the one that solidified to me that Star Wars is more than just a great movie. I think I've said before that Star Wars is a great movie, but Empire is a great. Empire is a great movie, but Star Wars is a great experience.
Yeah.
So, as the writer side of me likes Empire the best.
My favorite is Return of the Jedi, but Empire is definitely the best, the most well-written of them all, for sure. Yeah. It might even be the best made of them all.
Well, I mean, the whole Cloud City scene, everything about it is just amazing. Yeah.
But it doesn't have Ewoks.
This is true.
It has Ugnaughts. So maybe you have to add that to your... All right, finally, if you could be any character of the Star Wars universe, who would you be?
That is a good one. I think I would probably be. Damn, that's a good question. somebody should use that on their podcast. Um, I don't want to say Luke or Han because everybody says that.
Everybody says Han, I've noticed.
Everybody says Han,
Yeah.
and everybody says the Millennium Falcon for the ship. I think I'm going to have to cancel that, change that question. I'm going to say Qui-Gon Jinn.
Nice.
I think Qui-Gon is he's sort of the ultimate Jedi, or what I always thought a Jedi would be like. And he follows the rules enough to not get in trouble, but he goes off the reservation just enough to never get the really good job. So I like Qui-Gon a lot. I just love everything about the way his sort of ways of throwing in philosophy at the right time, and I like him a lot.
He is probably my favorite character of the prequels, if I had to actually admit it, but I would never. I'm going to go with Watto or Ben Quadraneros every day of the week.
Ben Quadraneros is the unsung hero of the Phantom Menace.
I've always said if his pod race worked, he would have won the race and there would be no more sequels. So
he had 4 engines, for goodness sake. He could have just done it.
Could have, but he didn't for the sake of the galaxy. That's what he did. Speaking of the galaxy, do you want to plug where everybody can find you at?
Sure, yeah. So you can find me at my podcast is Around the Galaxy, which is available wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter at ATGcast, or you go to my website, which is PeteFletzer.com. You can get my crazy 123,000 word book there, and also all my podcasts and some blog entries and stuff like that. It's all there. But I do a lot of I spend much more time on Twitter than I probably should. So if anybody wants to get in touch with me, that's the best way to go.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me here on the Outlander
Dude, this was so much fun.
It was awesome. It went really long. This is going to be broken up into 3 parts.
The trilogy.
Yeah. That's what we'll do. All right, I'm going to throw it over to Han so he can be like, Chewie, get us out of here.
Hey scumbags, thanks for watching. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up on our video. As always, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Rebel Scum Podcast, for all the latest videos.